The words at the bottom of the advertisement were not written by any grown person, and Wade Mercer knew it the moment he saw them. He stood beside the kitchen table with the county newspaper open under his rough hands. His own notice was circled in pencil near the bottom of the page. Cook and housekeeper wanted. Widowed rancher with one young daughter. Room, meals, and fair wages provided. Must be willing to live outside town. Under those words, written in uneven letters with a piece of blue pencil, someone had added 4 more. And a mama, too. Wade slowly lifted his eyes. 8-year-old Molly Mercer sat near the window with a rag doll in her lap. She was trying very hard to look interested in the loose thread hanging from the doll's dress. "Molly." She did not look up. "Did you write on this newspaper?" Her small shoulders rose. "Maybe." Wade stared at her. "You know you're not supposed to write on things that don't belong to you." "It belongs to us." "The newspaper." "The advertisement." That answer stopped him. Molly finally looked at him. Her brown eyes were serious in a face that still carried the softness of childhood, though the last 3 years had made her quieter than any child should have been. "You said we need somebody to cook." "We do." "And wash clothes." "Yes." "And fix things." "Some things." Molly hugged the doll against her chest. "Mamas do those things too." Wade's jaw tightened. The room seemed to grow colder. On the far wall hung a faded yellow curtain that Rebecca had sewn before Molly was born. A chipped white cup still sat on a high shelf because it had once been Rebecca's favorite. Wade had not used it since the winter fever took her. 3 years had passed. 3 years, and there were still parts of the house he could not change. He folded the newspaper. "We're hiring a cook, Molly." She looked down. "I know." Her voice was so small that Wade wished he had said nothing. The Mercer Ranch stood 12 miles outside the little Colorado town of Red Willow, where the mountains rose blue in the distance, and the winter wind came hard across the open land. Wade had inherited the ranch from his father and had spent most of his 36 years working it. He knew cattle. He knew horses. He knew how to mend a fence in freezing rain, and how to pull a calf from a frightened cow before sunrise. What he did not know was how to raise a little girl alone. Since Rebecca's death, he had done what he could. He cooked beans, potatoes, bacon, and the same heavy biscuits until Molly stopped complaining about them. He washed dresses badly. He ruined 2 of her stockings trying to mend them. Once, he sent her to church with 2 different ribbons in her hair because he had not noticed they were different colors. Molly never laughed at him. That made it worse. She had simply learned to help. Too much. One evening, Wade came in from the barn and found her standing on a wooden crate beside the stove. She was stirring a pot with both hands while smoke curled toward the ceiling. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. "What are you doing?" "Making supper." "You're 8 years old." "You were late." The pot held scorched beans and enough salt to preserve meat for a month. But Wade remembered looking at his daughter and realizing something that kept him awake that night. Molly was becoming the woman of the house because there was no woman left. The next morning, he rode into Red Willow and placed the advertisement. He expected an older widow from town. Maybe someone's unmarried aunt. Someone practical who needed wages and would not ask questions. He did not expect Lydia Bennett. Her letter arrived 6 days later. Wade opened it at the kitchen table while Molly ate oatmeal across from him. Lydia was 31. She had worked for a family in Kansas before their ranch was sold. She wrote that she could bake bread, cook over a wood stove, preserve vegetables, sew, clean, milk cows, and keep accounts. Her letter was short and direct. She needed work. She could arrive within 2 weeks. She asked only whether the room was private and whether Wade's daughter was kind. Wade almost smiled at that part. He looked across the table. Molly was feeding a spoonful of oatmeal to the cat. Apparently. What? Nothing. He folded the letter. That afternoon, Wade wrote back and offered Lydia Bennett the position. He told himself it was a business arrangement. Nothing more. Molly did not see his letter before he mailed it. At least he thought she did not. 2 weeks later, Wade and Molly waited at the small red willow train platform beneath a pale April sky. Molly had changed her dress twice that morning. "This is not a party," Wade had told her. "I know." "Then why are you wearing your Sunday ribbon?" She had ignored him. Now she stood beside him, holding the edge of his coat while the distant whistle echoed across the valley. Black smoke appeared beyond the bend. The train rolled toward the station. Wade suddenly felt foolish. He had exchanged only 2 letters with this woman. In less than 5 minutes, he would meet her and take her 12 miles into the empty country to live under his roof. The train stopped with a groan of iron. Passengers stepped down. An old man. A young couple. A soldier with a bandaged hand. Then a woman appeared in the doorway. She wore a dark green traveling dress and carried one small leather case. Her hair was chestnut brown, pinned neatly beneath a simple hat. She was not smiling, but there was something calm in her face. Something steady. Wade knew at once that she was Lydia. She stepped onto the platform and looked around. Her eyes found Wade. Then they moved to Molly. For one strange second, Lydia stopped completely. Molly squeezed Wade's coat. "Is that her?" Wade cleared his throat. "I believe so." Lydia walked toward them. "Mr. Mercer." "Miss Bennett." He touched the brim of his hat. "This is my daughter, Molly." Lydia looked down. "Hello, Molly." Molly stared at her. Wade feared she might hide behind him. Instead, she asked, "Can you make cinnamon rolls?" Wade closed his eyes for half a second. "Molly." But Lydia's mouth lifted slightly. "I can. With the white sugar on top. If there's enough sugar." Molly nodded seriously. Then she reached for Lydia's suitcase. It was much too heavy for her, and she nearly tipped sideways. Lydia caught it before it hit the ground. "I think we should let your father carry that." Molly looked up at Wade. "She can stay." Wade felt heat rise behind his collar. Lydia looked away, but he saw the smile she was trying to hide. The wagon ride home took more than an hour. At first, Wade drove while Lydia sat beside him, and Molly sat in the back. That lasted perhaps 3 minutes. Then Molly began asking questions. Had Lydia ever seen a rattlesnake? Yes. Could she braid hair? Yes. Could she read? Yes. Could she make apple pie? If they had apples. Could she sew a dress? Probably. Had she ever had children? That question changed the air. Wade turned slightly. Molly. But Lydia answered. No. Did you want any? Wade's hands tightened around the reins. Molly Mercer. This time the warning in his voice was clear. Molly became silent. Lydia looked toward the mountains. For several moments, only the wagon wheels and horses could be heard. Then Lydia spoke quietly. "I think I might have." Wade looked at her. She did not look back. Something in her voice told him not to ask more. When they reached the ranch, Lydia stood beside the wagon and studied the house, barn, chicken yard, and distant pasture. The house was strong but tired. The porch railing leaned. One shutter hung crooked. The vegetable garden was nothing but weeds. Wade suddenly saw the place through a stranger's eyes and felt ashamed. "It needs some work," he said. Lydia looked at him. "Most things do." Then she carried her case inside. By supper, Wade understood that Lydia Bennett was not a woman who waited to be told what needed doing. She opened cupboards, checked the flour barrel, inspected the stove, asked where the well was. Then she rolled up her sleeves. That evening, she made chicken stew with dumplings. Molly ate 2 bowls. Wade ate 3. Nobody spoke about it. The next morning, Wade woke before sunrise and smelled bread. Real bread. Warm bread. He stood in the hallway for a moment, almost afraid to enter the kitchen. Because for the first time in 3 years, the house smelled the way it had when Rebecca was alive. He walked in. Lydia stood beside the table cutting a loaf. Molly sat on a chair, while Lydia divided her hair into 3 sections. "You braid too tight," Molly complained. "It stays longer." "My mama did it softer." The words came without warning. Lydia's hand stopped. Wade froze in the doorway. Molly looked down. "I'm sorry." Lydia finished the braid gently. "You don't ever have to be sorry for remembering your mama." Wade looked away. Later that morning, while he repaired a fence near the north pasture, he kept thinking about those words. He had spent 3 years avoiding Rebecca's name because he thought silence protected Molly from pain. Perhaps all it had done was make the child carry her memories alone. Over the next several days, Lydia changed the rhythm of the Mercer ranch. She cleaned the kitchen, mended Molly's dresses, made curtains for the pantry, turned a patch of ground beside the house and planted onions. She never moved Rebecca's cup. She never touched the yellow curtains. And she never asked Wade why the garden behind the house had been left dead for 3 years. That mattered more than he expected. But Molly noticed something else. Lydia ate her meals standing near the stove or at the far end of the table. On the first Sunday evening, Wade came inside and found 3 plates set for supper. His plate at one end, Molly's beside it, and Lydia's at the opposite end. Molly stared at the arrangement. Then, while Lydia was outside gathering laundry, the child quietly picked up Lydia's plate. She carried it to the empty place beside Wade, the chair Rebecca had once used. Wade saw what she had done. His face went still. "Molly." She looked at him. "Put it back." "No." His voice hardened. "Molly." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not move the plate. "She's too far away down there." Wade stared at his daughter. Then he stared at the empty chair. At that moment, the back door opened. Lydia stepped inside carrying a basket of folded clothes. She saw the plate. She saw Wade. Then she saw Molly standing protectively beside the chair. Nobody spoke. And Wade suddenly understood that hiring Lydia Bennett might have brought something into his house far more dangerous than gossip, loneliness, or memories. Hope. Wade did not tell Molly to move the plate again. For several long seconds, he stood beside the table while Lydia remained near the back door with the laundry basket pressed against her hip. Molly looked from one adult to the other. Finally, Wade pulled out his own chair. "Supper's getting cold." That was all he said. Lydia slowly set down the basket. She crossed the room and sat in the chair beside Wade. Rebecca's chair. Wade felt the memory of his wife so strongly that for one terrible second he almost stood back up. He could see Rebecca there as she had been years earlier, laughing because Molly had thrown peas on the floor. He could hear her asking him to bring more wood before the snow came. He could remember her hand resting on that very table. Then Molly reached for the biscuits. "Miss Lydia made these." The moment broke. Wade took one. "So I noticed." Molly smiled, and Lydia lowered her eyes. After that evening, the chair stayed where Molly had moved it. Nobody discussed it. But something had shifted. The house no longer seemed divided into Wade's rooms, Molly's rooms, and the space occupied by a hired woman. Lydia began to belong to the daily rhythm of the ranch. She knew which horse kicked at strangers. She learned that Wade liked his coffee strong enough to keep a spoon standing straight. She discovered that Molly hated carrots but would eat them if they were hidden in stew. And Wade learned things about Lydia too. She sang quietly when she needed bread. She always saved the smallest biscuit for herself. She checked every door twice before going to bed. And whenever someone mentioned Kansas, her face changed. He never asked why. Not until a stormy night in May. Rain had been falling since afternoon. By dark, the yard was mud and the creek behind the lower pasture had begun to rise. Wade came inside soaked through. Lydia was waiting with a towel. "Take that coat off before you ruin the floor." He obeyed before thinking about it. Molly giggled from the table. "She bosses you. Eat your supper." Lydia hid a smile. Later, after Molly went upstairs, Wade found Lydia sitting near the stove repairing one of his work shirts. "You don't have to mend that tonight." "I know." Thunder rolled outside. She flinched. It was small, but Wade noticed. "Storms bother you?" "No." Another crack sounded closer. Her hand stopped. Wade leaned against the table. That looked like yes. Lydia stared at the shirt. For a while she said nothing. Then she spoke. "My father drank." Wade's expression changed. "Badly." She continued sewing, but her fingers were tighter around the cloth now. When storms came, he would come home early because there was nowhere else to go. Those were usually the worst nights. Wade did not interrupt. "My mother died when I was 15. After that, I stayed until I was 19, then I left. Kansas. Eventually." She pulled the thread through. There was a man there. Wade's jaw tightened for reasons he did not fully understand. "You married?" "No." Lydia gave a small, humorless smile. "I almost did." Thunder moved farther away. "He was kind until he thought I belonged to him, then he wasn't." Wade looked at the bruise-colored sky beyond the window. "Did he hurt you?" Lydia's silence answered first. "Once." Wade's face hardened. "Once was enough." She looked up at him. Something passed between them. Not pity. She would have hated pity. It was understanding. "I left that night." "And he let you?" "No." Her voice became colder. "I stopped asking permission." Wade almost smiled. That sounded like her. Then Lydia folded the repaired shirt and laid it on the table. "That's why I keep money put away." Wade looked at her. "Going money?" "Yes. If a woman has enough money to leave, nobody gets to tell her she can't." Wade nodded. "I suppose that's true." Lydia studied him. "You suppose?" "I think a person should always be free to walk away." The words sounded right when he said them. But later, lying awake in his room, Wade discovered he did not like the thought of Lydia walking away at all. By June, the grass had turned bright across the pasture, and Molly spent nearly every afternoon following Lydia around the yard. One evening, Wade came from the barn and found the two of them sitting beneath the cottonwood tree. Molly held a school book. Lydia pointed to the page. "Again." Molly sounded out the sentence slowly. Then she finished it without help. Her face lit up. "I did it." "You did." Molly threw her arms around Lydia's neck. Wade stopped near the fence. Lydia froze at first. Then slowly, carefully, she hugged the child back. The sight struck Wade harder than he expected. He turned away before either of them noticed him. The next morning brought trouble. A writer came from town shortly after breakfast. His name was Silas Crane. Wade knew him immediately. Crane owned a large spread east of Red Willow and had been trying to buy the southern section of Wade's ranch for years. He was a broad man with expensive boots, a silver watch chain, and the comfortable smile of someone used to getting what he wanted. Wade. Silas. Crane looked toward the house. His eyes rested on Lydia, who was hanging sheets near the porch. I heard you hired help. Wade's expression cooled. You rode 12 miles to discuss my cooking. Crane laughed. No. He pulled an envelope from his coat. Banknote. Wade took it. His stomach tightened before he opened it. 2 years earlier, a hard winter had killed nearly a third of his herd. He had borrowed money against the eastern pasture to recover. The note was coming due. Wade already knew that. What he did not know was that the bank had sold the note to Silas Crane. He read the paper twice. You bought this? Yesterday. Why? Crane smiled. You know why. Wade looked toward the distant pasture. The eastern land bordered Crane's property and contained the best spring on the ranch. You want the spring. I want the land. Not for sale. Everything's for sale when a man can't pay his debt. Wade folded the paper. How long? 30 days. Crane mounted his horse. Then he glanced once more toward Lydia. Interesting arrangement you've got here. Wade stepped closer. Careful. Crane raised one hand. No insult intended. But his smile said otherwise. He rode away. Wade stood in the road holding the paper. Lydia had stopped hanging sheets. She watched him. That evening, Wade sat alone at the kitchen table with his ledger open. He counted the money again. Then again. It made no difference. He was short by $62. It might as well have been $600. He could sell cattle, but not quickly enough without accepting a terrible price. He could sell horses. Tools. His father's old revolver. Still, the numbers barely worked. Lydia entered quietly. How bad? Wade closed the ledger. It's handled. No, it isn't. He looked up. She stood across from him. You've been staring at the same page for an hour. It's ranch business. And if the ranch is lost, it won't be. That isn't what I asked. Wade rubbed his jaw. Finally, he told her. The loaned. The eastern pasture. The spring. The 30 days. Lydia listened. Then she walked upstairs. Wade heard a drawer open. A minute later, she returned with a small brown pouch. She set it on the table. Coins struck wood. No. Wade answered before she spoke. It's $70. No. You need 62. I said no. Lydia's face tightened. You haven't even counted it. I don't need to. It's mine. Exactly. She pushed the pouch toward him. Take it. Wade pushed it back. That's your leaving money. The kitchen went silent. Lydia stared at him. You remembered. Of course I remembered. Her eyes softened. Then you know what it means if I give it to you. Wade looked at the pouch. Then at her. And suddenly the money was no longer money. It was trust. It was Lydia Bennett placing the one thing that guaranteed her freedom into his hands. His chest tightened. I can't take this from you. You wouldn't be taking it. I'm giving it. Why? The question escaped him before he could stop it. Lydia looked toward the stairs where Molly slept. Then back at Wade. Because I don't want you to lose this place. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Wade stood. They were close now. Closer than they had ever been. He could see the little line near her eyebrow, the faint flower still caught on the sleeve of her dress, the nervous movement of her fingers. Lydia. She raised her eyes. For 1 second, Wade thought he might touch her. Then a floorboard creaked upstairs. Both of them stepped back. Molly appeared at the top of the stairs. Pa. What is it? I heard voices. Go back to bed. She looked at Lydia. Are you leaving? Lydia's face changed. No, sweetheart. Molly stayed where she was. Promise. Lydia looked at Wade. Then she looked back at the child. I promise I'm here tonight. Molly did not look satisfied. But she returned to her room. The next morning, Wade rode into town with his father's revolver wrapped in cloth and his best roping saddle tied behind him. He sold both. 3 days later, he sold 6 young steers earlier than he wanted to. When the 30 days ended, Wade walked into the bank and placed every dollar on the counter. Silas Crane was already there. He watched the clerk count it. Once. Twice. Then the banker nodded. Paid in full. Crane's smile disappeared. Wade took the stamped paper. The eastern pasture stays mine. Crane leaned against the counter. You had help. Wade looked at him. I had enough. Then he walked outside. He should have felt relief. Instead, he found Lydia waiting near the general store with Molly beside her. Molly ran toward him. Did we keep the ranch? Wade crouched and held up the paper. We kept it. She shouted loud enough for half of Red Willow to hear. Lydia smiled. And Wade realized that the first person he wanted to see after saving his land was her. That should have frightened him. What came next frightened him more. The gossip began before summer ended. People had noticed Lydia. They noticed she lived in Wade's house. They noticed Molly called for her whenever she scraped a knee. They noticed Lydia sat beside Wade at church. They noticed Wade no longer looked like a man who had buried every good thing in his life. And one Sunday after service, Lydia overheard 2 women speaking behind the church. A hired woman is one thing. Living under the same roof with a widower is another. Poor child probably doesn't know what to call her. Lydia walked past without reacting. But Wade saw her face when she reached the wagon. That night she barely spoke. 2 days later, Wade came inside and found her suitcase open on the bed in the spare room. He stopped in the doorway. Lydia was folding dresses. What are you doing? She did not turn. What I should have done before people started talking. His stomach dropped. You're leaving. I think it's best. For who? For Molly. No. Lydia finally faced him. She has to grow up here. People remember stories. They repeat them. I won't have her name dragged through town because I stayed too long in a house where I don't belong. Wade stared at her. You think you don't belong here? Lydia's eyes shone. Belonging isn't something I get to decide alone. Wade wanted to answer. He wanted to tell her the house had become warmer because of her. That Molly laughed again because of her. That he listened for her footsteps every morning before he even opened his eyes. But grief had made him careful. Too careful. And fear sealed his mouth. Lydia waited. When he said nothing, something in her expression broke. She nodded once. I'll stay until you find someone else." Then she turned away. Neither of them saw Molly standing in the hallway behind Wade. The child had heard every word. And that night, after the house went quiet, Molly took a sheet of paper from her school book, carried it to her room, and began writing something in the careful round letters Lydia had taught her. The next morning, Lydia came downstairs before sunrise. She had barely slept. Her suitcase was packed upstairs, and although she had told Wade she would remain until another cook could be found, part of her had already begun saying goodbye. She entered the kitchen expecting darkness. Instead, a small lamp burned on the table, and something lay on her plate. Lydia stopped. It was a sheet of paper folded once down the middle. Her name was written across the front. Miss Lydia. The letters leaned in different directions. Lydia slowly opened it. Inside was a drawing. A square house. A barn. 3 people standing beside each other. One tall. One smaller. One very small. And beside them was a horse that looked more like a large dog. Underneath the picture, Molly had written, "Pa wanted a cook. I wanted a mama. Please stay and be both." Lydia covered her mouth. For several seconds, she could not breathe properly. Then she heard bare feet on the stairs. Molly appeared wearing her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stopped when she saw the paper in Lydia's hands. "Did you read it?" Lydia nodded. Molly came closer. "I wrote it myself." "I can see that. I spelled Mama right." "You did." Molly's chin began to shake. "Are you still going?" Lydia closed her eyes for a moment. "Molly." The child rushed across the room and wrapped both arms around Lydia's waist. "Please don't." Lydia knelt. "Molly, listen to me." "No." "Molly. You promised you were here last night." "And I was. But I want you here every night." Tears ran down the child's face. "I don't want another cook. Cooks leave. Mrs. Grady left. Mrs. Porter left. Everybody leaves." Lydia pulled her close. "I don't want to leave you." "Then don't." "It isn't that simple." Molly pulled back. "Why?" Lydia looked toward the staircase. "Because your father has not asked me to stay." She could not say the words. "Not to a child." Instead, she brushed the tears from Molly's cheeks. "Some decisions belong to grown people." Molly sniffed. "Then grown people make everything too hard." Despite herself, Lydia laughed through her tears. At that moment, the kitchen door opened. Wade stepped inside. He had been at the barn since before dawn, though very little work had been done. He had spent most of the morning thinking about the packed suitcase upstairs. He stopped when he saw Molly crying. Then he noticed the paper in Lydia's hand. "What happened?" Molly turned. "I fixed it." Wade frowned. "Fixed what?" "Miss Lydia leaving." His eyes moved to Lydia. She slowly handed him the paper. Wade read the words. Once. Then again. His daughter watched him. "So?" Wade lowered the paper. "So what?" "Tell her." "Molly." "Tell her she can be my mama." The room became painfully quiet. Lydia stood. "Molly, that's enough." "No." The child's voice rose. "Everybody keeps saying no because nobody says what they want." Wade stared at her. Molly pointed at Lydia. "She wants to stay." Then she pointed at Wade. "You want her to stay." Wade's face changed. "And I want her to stay." Molly folded her arms. "So everybody wants the same thing." Neither adult answered. Molly looked furious. Then why is her suitcase packed? She marched out of the kitchen and ran upstairs. A door slammed. Wade and Lydia remained alone. For a long moment, neither moved. Finally, Lydia looked toward the stove. She's angry. She gets that from me. No. Lydia gave him a sad smile. She gets the courage to say things from somewhere else. Wade looked down at Molly's drawing. The three figures were holding hands. He rubbed his thumb over the words at the bottom. I found something yesterday. Lydia watched him. He crossed to the writing desk and opened the bottom drawer. From inside, he took an old newspaper. The advertisement. He placed it on the table. Lydia looked at the notice. Then she saw the small blue writing underneath. And a mama, too. Her eyes widened. Molly wrote that. Wade nodded. Before you ever answered. Lydia looked at him. You knew. From the beginning. And you never told me. I thought it was foolish. Lydia's expression tightened. A child wanting a mother is foolish. No. Wade immediately shook his head. I thought believing a stranger could walk into this house and become something more was foolish. He looked toward the yellow curtains. I had a wife. Lydia said nothing. I loved her. I know. For a long time, I thought loving anyone again meant I hadn't loved Rebecca enough. Lydia's eyes softened. Wade continued. Then you came here. His voice became rough. You filled the pantry, fixed Molly's dresses, planted onions where nothing had grown, you made bread, you made her laugh. He looked at Lydia. And somewhere along the way, I started listening for you. She swallowed. Went. Every morning. Lydia's eyes filled. Wade stepped closer. When I wake up, I listen for your footsteps downstairs. Another step. When I'm in the pasture, I wonder what you're doing. Another. When I rode into town to pay that note, the only two people I cared about seeing afterward were Molly and you. Lydia stared at him. Wade. I should have said this 2 nights ago. Yes. The answer came so quickly that Wade almost laughed. You're right. He reached for her hand, then stopped just before touching it. If you stay, I don't want you staying because Molly needs someone. Lydia's breathing changed. I don't want you staying because I need a cook. He finally took her hand. I want you to stay because this house feels wrong when you're not in it. Tears slipped down Lydia's cheeks. And if people talk, they already talk. And Molly. She appears to have settled the matter. Lydia laughed softly. Wade smiled for the first time. Then his expression became serious. I'm asking badly. You are. I don't know how to ask well. I know. He squeezed her hand. Lydia Bennett, would you stay here as my wife? Her face crumpled. Wade immediately looked worried. Is that a no? She shook her head while laughing and crying at once. No. Wade froze. Lydia squeezed his hand. No, it is not a no. Understanding slowly crossed his face. You're saying yes. I'm saying yes. A loud thump came from the stairs. Molly had apparently been listening from the hallway. She burst into the kitchen. Really? Wade looked at her. Were you spying? No. You weren't. I was waiting. She ran toward Lydia. You're staying. Lydia knelt. I'm staying. Forever. Lydia looked up at Wade. As long as he'll have me. Wade shook his head. No. Both of them looked at him. He crossed the room. As long as you'll have us. Molly threw her arms around them both. They were married 3 weeks later in the small white church at Red Willow. There were no expensive flowers. No grand celebration. Lydia wore a pale blue dress she had made herself. Wade wore the dark coat he usually saved for funerals and Sundays. Molly carried wildflowers she had gathered along the creek. When the minister asked who gave the bride away, Molly whispered loudly, "Nobody, she's coming to us." Half the church laughed. Even Wade. The women who had whispered about Lydia came too. Some looked embarrassed. Others suddenly acted as if they had supported the match from the beginning. Lydia did not care. When the ceremony ended, Molly grabbed both their hands and refused to let go until they reached the wagon. That autumn, the house changed again. Not quickly. Not completely. Rebecca's yellow curtains remained in the kitchen. Her cup remained on the shelf. Lydia never asked Wade to remove them. One morning, she found him standing behind the house, looking at the dead garden. "I've been thinking about planting here next spring," she said. Wade was quiet. "Rebecca planted it." "I know." Lydia turned to leave. Wade stopped her. "She grew roses by that fence." Lydia looked back. Wade pointed. "They never did well, too much shade." Then he pointed toward the southern side. "Put yours there, more sun." Lydia understood what he was giving her. Not Rebecca's place. A place of her own. The next spring, they planted together. Molly planted far too many sunflowers. Most survived. That summer, Wade came home from the north pasture near sunset. He stopped outside the house. Through the open window, he could hear Molly reading aloud. Her voice was stronger now. Lydia corrected one word. Molly complained. Lydia corrected it again. Then both started laughing. Wade remained outside for a moment. Years earlier, after Rebecca died, he had believed grief meant a door had closed forever. He had been wrong. Some doors stayed closed. They should. But sometimes life built another door beside the first one. And sometimes all a lonely man had to do was be brave enough to walk through it. Wade opened the kitchen door. Molly looked up. "Pa, what?" Mama made cinnamon rolls. Wade stopped. His eyes moved to Lydia. She stood beside the stove, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "White sugar on top?" he asked. Molly grinned. "Lots." Wade removed his hat and hung it on the peg beside the door. Then he crossed the room and took his place at the table. The same table that had once held only 2 silent people. Now there were 3 plates. 3 voices. 3 lives. And on the wall beside Molly's school papers hung an old newspaper advertisement framed in simple wood. At the bottom, written in a child's crooked blue letters, were the words that had started everything. "And a mama, too."